Sign it, Dad. Sign it now. We can't wait any longer. Those were the first words Rachel said to me on Christmas Eve last year. Not Merry Christmas, not good to see you, not even, how have you been, Richard? Just an order spoken with a smile thin enough to slice skin sharp enough to tell me she thought she had already won. I set my carving knife down. The reflections from the candles flickered against the stainless steel blade, widening, shrinking, widening again, almost like the knife itself sensed the shift in the room. Then I looked straight into my daughter-in-law's eyes. Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She simply held her smile beautiful on the surface, but cold enough to frost the air between us. Her voice flowed like practiced dialogue. Just a signature, Richard. One little confirmation. For our future. My son Michael sat beside her, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. His eyes glued to the table, specifically to my wine glass he'd been watching all evening. Like he knew its purpose. Like he feared I might catch him looking. Slowly, deliberately, I asked again, "What exactly am I signing, Rachel?" Her smile twitched exactly 1 millimeter. She tilted her head, brown hair cascading over one shoulder with the elegance of someone who believed she was choreographing the entire evening. She pushed the document toward me with one manicured finger. "It's nothing serious. Just an authorization. To help finalize the house paperwork. House paperwork." That was her word for it. But I am 66 years old, a widower, a man who has lived long enough to smell deceit from across a river, and I knew before my fingers even touched the paper that this wasn't an authorization. It was a transfer, a quiet, elegant, bloodless theft, signed by the man she thought was too old to notice. I lifted my eyes to her, and said calmly but with a weight that made the candles flicker, "Rachel, do you really think I'm so old I wouldn't notice you're trying to steal from me?" Her smile collapsed. All the masks she'd worn for a year, the politeness, the charm, the sweet daughter-in-law crumbled in a single breath. For the first time, I saw her eyes without the performance greed, contempt, and the absolute belief that I was a man she could crush without consequence. Michael jerked upright. Dad, it's not what it looks like." Rachel I raised a hand. Not loudly, not angrily, just decisively. "Michael, if you intend to speak truth, speak. If you intend to cover for her, do not say a word." And the house fell silent. Not quiet silent in the way a hunting ground becomes silent right before the predator moves. No one touched their food, no one breathed too loudly. Even the wind outside seemed to pause at the windows. And in that moment on that cold Christmas night, I understood something. My family had crossed a line we would never walk back from. But the weight of that moment began 30 minutes earlier. The dinner didn't start with shouting. It started with smiles, the kind that hide knives under the table. My name is Richard Hayes, and this is how the last Christmas dinner of my family truly began. 4:00 p.m., the table. I had set the table hours before. The lakeside home, usually silent, glowed with a warm gold that winter evenings rarely offer. In the center of the table sat a single empty glass. Mary's glass. My wife of 35 years. Gone now, but not gone from the table. Not gone from my decisions. Not gone from my spine. I placed that empty glass there to remind myself of one truth. Someone was still watching. Someone still wanted me to stand my ground. The doorbell and the smile that wasn't a smile. Rachel stepped in first. Deep red dress hugging her frame, makeup perfect, lips curved upward or rather pulled upward the way someone smiles when they know something you don't. There are two kinds of smiles in Rachel Hayes' world, one for people she wants to impress, one for people she believes are already beneath her. Tonight I received the second. She handed me a bottle of wine like a queen granting mercy. "It's wonderful you finally want to discuss the future." The tone of a victor speaking to the conquered. I answered softly, "Yes, the future of this house." The corner of her lip twitched, not with warmth but with triumph. Emily ran to hug me, the only pure soul at that doorway. And behind her came Michael, eyes on the floor, shoulders weighed down by secrets he didn't know how to carry. Dinner. The storm under the tablecloth. We sat. Silverware chimed softly. The Oregon sky outside hung heavy, dark, waiting. But inside, a different storm gathered, one with a name and a plan: Rachel Hayes. She kept refilling my wine. Every time the glass dipped below halfway, her hand moved with rehearsed grace. "Drink, Dad. Tonight is family." But her eyes, they weren't inviting me to relax. They were measuring me, testing me, predicting how fast I might fall asleep. Michael said nothing. He looked at me, then away, guilt pushing at the edges of his silence. There was a script on this table, and everyone except me knew their lines. Rachel set her glass down, a soft sound but sharp, like a warning shot. "Richard, perhaps it's time someone helped you with your paperwork." I raised my head slowly. Someone meant her. Paperwork meant my house. Help meant take. She leaned back, confident, relaxed, as if waiting for the judge to stamp a verdict already written. My voiceover, the one in my head, cut through the quiet. "She believes she's already won, and that's exactly when I need to stay awake." In that moment, as Rachel prepared her final move, as Michael sat in silent guilt, as the wine waited to be used as a weapon, I realized this wasn't a Christmas dinner. This was an ambush. A quiet, elegant ambush. But there is one thing Rachel did not know. I may be old, but I am not done. Not by a long mile. And now, as I tell you what happened after the sentence, "Rachel never should have spoken," I want you to leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Because what comes next is colder than that Christmas night ever could be. The morning after that Christmas dinner, I woke up with the feeling that someone had set a stone-cold, heavy, immovable right in the center of my chest. Winter light in Bend is always thin, blue, metallic. It slips through the blinds like a blade, falling across the photo of Mary and me on the wooden nightstand. I wanted to believe everything from the night before had been a misunderstanding, a moment of impulsiveness from Rachel, a moment of weakness from Michael. But the truth always finds a way into your house, even if it has to bend itself into the thinnest cracks to do it. And that morning it stepped through my inbox. I made myself a cup of black coffee, what Mary used to call my clear your mind medicine. I opened my laptop planning to check Christmas messages from old friends, but instead I saw an email from the bank. New attachment, appraisal value ready for sale, and right under it the contact name, Rachel Hayes. A chill moved down my spine, not fast but slow, deliberate, like a finger tracing ice across skin. I opened the attachment, a full appraisal of my lakeside home, completed, stamped. At the bottom corner was a note: "Client confirms owner will sign next week." I read that line 3 times. The owner will sign next week. The owner was me. The one confirming was Rachel. I sat there motionless. The kitchen felt too still, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the ticking of a wall clock sound like a countdown to something breaking. Tick, tick, tick. Then something pulled me up from my chair. I walked slowly toward my old study, the room Mary used to prepare her lesson plans in. I flipped the switch. Warm yellow light filled the room, and instantly I saw it. The family photo. The one of the 4 of us, Mary, Michael, Emily, and me, except the part where I stood beside Mary, had been cut out. Cut clean, cut straight, cut with the precision of someone who wasn't rushing, someone who meant it. I lifted the frame, turned it over. No loose piece of photo, no tear, no accidental damage, just one thing: intention. In that moment, something I'd refused to admit for months finally took its full shape. Someone in my own family wanted me gone. Not just out of the picture metaphorically, but out of the picture legally. A cold blade of realization, a wordless warning. I sank into the chair and touched the empty space where I used to stand, the place where Mary once rested her hand on my shoulder every holiday photo. And today, I had been erased. I exhaled slowly. The coffee in my hand tasted suddenly thin and cold, like water left too long on the counter. Then the doorbell rang. There are some doorbells that carry the scent of the person pressing them. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Rachel stood there, holding a warm apple pie, steam rising softly from it, sweet, pleasant, and undeniably fake. She smiled the way someone smiles before laying a chloroform cloth over your face. "Hi, Dad. I brought you some pie. It's Christmas, there should be something warm in the house." Her voice was light, but her eyes were heavier than the stone in my chest. She stepped inside as if this were already her home. No permission asked. No invitation needed. Rachel set the pie on the counter, opened a cabinet, took out a mug, and poured herself coffee. my coffee with the confidence of someone pouring a drink in her own kitchen. "Did you get the email I forwarded to you?" Her tone was gentle. Her eyes were knives. I answered slow and steady, "Yes. But I haven't gone through all of it yet." A small smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. Not a polite smile, not a family smile, a confirmation smile. Rachel sipped my coffee, then glanced around the kitchen like she was mentally calculating the value of every item. "This house is still beautiful, Dad. That lake view? Honestly, I think it's priceless." She said this house of ours with a sense of ownership more solid than the walls around us. And right then I knew. When she poured coffee in my house, she no longer saw herself as a guest. Her eyes drifted to the family photo, the one with the missing piece. She tilted her head. "Oh, that picture looks different. I didn't know you were into editing photos, Dad." I looked at her. She looked at me. We both knew. Neither of us said it. The silence between us wasn't family silence. It was battlefield silence. Rachel stood, dusted her dress, and said, "Well, I have to go help my mom prepare dinner. But make sure you read that email carefully. Okay? It's very important." She placed a hand on my shoulder, light enough to seem affectionate, heavy enough to make my skin go cold. Her heels clicked across the wooden floor, sharp, precise, rhythmic. A countdown walking away. When the door shut, I looked around my kitchen, not to check if anything was missing, but to understand that everything was changing. A year ago, this house held memories, warmth, and Mary's laughter soaked into every corner. But that morning, it became a battleground. And I was the last one standing on my side of the line. I looked at the sliced photo, I looked at the appraisal email, I looked at the coffee mug Rachel drank from, and I understood Christmas wasn't a holiday this year. It was the first warning shot, a battle I didn't choose, but one I could no longer avoid. That was the morning I realized this house was no longer safe, and the person who made it unsafe was someone I once called family. There are mornings when you wake up feeling like you're living in your own home, and there are mornings when you wake up with the unsettling sense that someone is quietly preparing to move you out of it. That morning, Bend was as cold as ever. The lake outside was drowned in a sheet of gray fog, but the air inside my house, it felt different. It felt thick, heavy, as if someone had stood in my bedroom through the night watching me sleep. I sat at my desk staring at the family photo, the one now missing the part where I stood beside Mary. Pieces of memory ripped clean from the frame, just like someone was trying to rip me out of my own life. I knew what I had to do. I needed answers. And there was only one man who could tell me which legal roads were still open. Peter Collins, Mary's attorney, an old family friend, the one person I could still trust. Peter's office sat in downtown Bend near the public library. The place always smelled of old paper and pine wood, the same scent that used to fill our kitchen when Mary worked on her lesson plans. Peter looked at me over his silver-rimmed glasses, his tired eyes telling me I looked older than I did last year. "Richard." "What happened?" "Christmas dinner didn't go too well. I take it I didn't circle around it." I placed the printed bank email in front of him. Peter adjusted his glasses, read it, and his face changed. "An appraisal for sale." He tapped the page with one finger. "Contact listed as Rachel Hayes." He looked up. "This isn't a misunderstanding." I sank into the chair opposite him, my hands gripping the edge of his wooden desk. "Peter, tell me straight. If someone is trying to take this house from me, what do I have left to stand on?" Peter was silent for a long time, the kind of silence that means the next words will change something you once thought unchangeable. Finally, he opened Mary's old file. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Soft, clean, confident. "Mary's will," Peter said. "According to this, the house eventually goes to Michael, when the time is right." My heart tightened, not because Mary intended it for Michael, but because Peter emphasized 3 words, "when the time is right." He turned a page. "Richard Herr will states the transfer happens after your passing, meaning right now, the house belongs entirely to you." I leaned back. A cold truth crawled into me, slow as winter water. Rachel knew this. And if she wanted the house, she needed my signature. Peter met my eyes squarely. "Richard, if you want to secure this place, you can create a living trust. You maintain full ownership for the rest of your life. No one, not even Michael, can touch it. The room went silent, as if time itself paused to listen. A living trust. 2 words I never thought I would need. I asked quietly, "And if I do this, what will people think?" Peter spoke slowly. "What they think doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're safe, and whether, a year from now, this house is still yours." A blade cutting through the last bit of naivete I still carried. I signed the appointment paperwork, living trust scheduled for next week. But fate, if you believe in such a thing, always finds a way to deliver bad news to the wrong person at the perfect time. While I was driving home that day, Michael was standing in his kitchen looking at his phone. A new notification appeared. Appointment scheduled. Peter Collins' law office, 10:30 a.m. Wednesday. He frowned. Rachel stepped out of the hallway, hairdryer still buzzing, and leaned over his shoulder. Just 1 second. 1 glance. But it was the second that birthed the next storm. Her expression changed. Gone was the concerned wife. In its place, the look of a hunter watching prey slip through the wrong door. "Why is your father seeing a lawyer now? Who put that idea in his head? Who's trying to turn him against us?" Michael sighed. "Rachel, maybe Dad just wants to update his paperwork. He's getting older. Worrying is normal." Rachel cut in, her voice sharp as metal. "No. Old people don't see lawyers for no reason. Unless someone is feeding them nonsense." She placed a hand on his shoulder, soft enough to seem gentle, hard enough to press guilt into his bones. "Michael, can't you see he's declining? He's confused, irrational. He's not thinking clearly anymore." Michael stepped back 1/2 foot. "Rachel, that's a bit harsh." "It's the truth," she snapped. "You need to take control of your father's finances before he ruins everything for us." That last word, "us," didn't comfort him. It weighed on him, and doubt, Rachel's sharpest weapon, slipped quietly into his chest like a splinter. Michael stared again at the appointment notice, and for the first time, he wavered. And with that single crack, Rachel began pushing poison through it. As for me, I was driving through the tall pines of Bend, the wind slapping the side of my truck like someone reminding me my life was no longer peaceful. I thought of Mary. I thought of how she once told me, "Richard, when something isn't right, you'll feel it in your bones." And that morning, I felt it. When I arrived home, the lake was perfectly still, but my instincts were not. I walked into the kitchen, saw the half-finished coffee Rachel left behind, set the cup in the sink, looked at the empty space in the family photo, then at the bank's appraisal email once more. It wasn't Christmas night that woke me up, it was the morning after. Truth shows itself most clearly when daylight hits it the right way, and that day, the light hit the right person. That was when I understood the battle hadn't started yet, but I no longer had the option to walk away from it. Late December 2024. There are phone calls that wake you faster than any cup of coffee. And there are phone calls that tell you someone isn't just trying to take your house, they're trying to erase you entirely. That morning, I had just set my coffee on the table when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of my bank, the same bank I'd used for 20 years back when Mary was still alive. I answered. Tom Becker's voice came through, polite as always, but carrying a hesitation I'd never heard from him. "Mr. Hayes, I need to confirm something with you. Is this your signature on the refinancing application?" I stood up straight. "Refinancing? What application?" There was a pause, short but heavy. Then Tom said, "The file submitted last night, your name, your address, your date of birth, and the signature? Well, it's your name." My heart slammed once, sharp and hollow, the way it does when you realize the ground beneath you isn't solid after all. "Send it to me. Now." Seconds later, the scan appeared in my inbox. I opened it. My name, my address, my financial information, all accurate. Except one thing. The signature. It was my name, but not my handwriting. The angle was off, the strokes too heavy, the rhythm all wrong. Mary used to tease me that my signature was so neat it could pass for a school teacher's. This signature, it was wearing my name like a stolen coat. Tom's voice returned tighter now. "Mr. Hayes, we can't process this without verification. Something isn't right. Did you give anyone signing authority?" My answer was cold, deliberate, spoken like tapping a hammer against frozen glass. "No, and I know exactly who did this. After the call ended, I stared through the window at the lake. Dusk was closing in. Black clouds rolled over the treetops like a funeral cloth being pulled across the sky. Not fear, not anger, just clarity. A cold, sharp clarity that comes to a man who finally accepts he's not living in innocence anymore. I closed my laptop and walked into the living room. For the first time in months, I opened the security camera archive, something I rarely checked, but that morning, my instincts wouldn't let me ignore it. I scrubbed through the footage, day by day, night by night. Then I froze. 10:03 p.m., 3 days before Christmas. The front door opened. Not me, not Michael, Rachel. Her silhouette looked crisp under the porch light. She walked in like she owned the place. No rush, no sneaking, no fear. In her hand was a manila folder, the kind used only in banks and law offices. I slowed the footage. Even though it was only a 1080p camera, I could see the edge of a document inside the same document the bank had emailed me that morning. Rachel walked straight into the kitchen, turned on the light, placed the folder on the counter, and reached into her purse. She pulled out a pen. A sleek metal pen, not a cheap one. Rachel always liked expensive things. She bent over the file and signed. Fast, confident, no hesitation, no fear of being caught. She walked out less than 2 minutes later. No second glance, no adjusting anything, not even locking the door carefully, as if she knew I'd never checked the footage. I rewound the clip, watched again, and that's when I noticed the detail most people would miss. She was wearing gloves, thin leather driving gloves, the kind that don't leave fingerprints. A single detail sharp enough to freeze the blood in my veins. This wasn't greed, this wasn't impulsive, this wasn't desperation, this was a plan. Every step, every movement, every signature. She fully expected me to sign. And if I didn't, she would sign for me. I shut off the screen. The room fell into a silence that felt dangerous. Not the silence of a lakeside home, but the silence that follows when you realize the person trying to destroy you has been walking in and out of your house more than you knew. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer, the one Mary bought me for our 30th anniversary. On the first page, I wrote 2 words, the evidence. On the next page, I listed time of the bank's call scan of the forged signature, timestamp of Rachel entering the house, the manila folder, the gloves. Each line felt like driving a nail into a new frame of reality. I didn't shake. I didn't rage. Rage is for the unprepared. I had crossed a line into something colder. Cold like the wooden table under my palm. Cold like the winter wind pushing through the doorframe. Cold like the calm confidence with which Rachel signed my name 3 nights before Christmas. There is nothing more dangerous than someone who believes you can't fight back, because once they believe that, they'll do anything. And Rachel, she had already started doing anything. That night, I sat in the living room alone. No lights, no fire, no Christmas music, Mary's old favorites, just darkness. And that dark space in the center of the room, the one Mary once called the place where intuition lives. I knew I was in a war. Not a family argument, not a misunderstanding, not a dispute. A war of signatures, a war of documents, a war of evidence, a war between truth and deception. And in this kind of war, the quieter person is almost always the more dangerous one. I closed the notebook, leaned back in the chair, and whispered the line I still remember clearly: if she thinks I will surrender, she's never seen me fight. And if you think this was the darkest moment, you're wrong. Because next I'm going to tell you about the recording Mary left me, the one she made before she died, the one that saved me at the exact moment I needed saving. And when you hear what she said, I promise you your blood will run cold. Some truths come to you through bank emails, some truths arrive through grainy security footage, and some truths are whispered by an old neighbor so quietly that even the wind nearly swallows them whole. That morning I was reheating yesterday's coffee when I heard a soft knock, the kind of knock you only use when you're afraid not to knock at all. I opened the door. Linda Monroe stood there clutching a tray of apple pie like it was a shield. Linda was the kind of woman Bend, Oregon produced often. Early silver hair, gentle smile, and the sort of quiet sorrow only long winters can carve into a person. But that morning, she wasn't smiling. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold. "Richard, I need to tell you something." Her voice was so low I had to hold my breath just to hear it. We sat at the kitchen table. The smell of warm apple pie floated between us, but it wasn't enough to push back the feeling that something dark had followed her into my home. Linda clasped her fingers together, gathering courage like broken pieces of glass. Last night, I heard Rachel, out in the yard. I didn't speak, just looked at her. She swallowed. She said, "Once he signs, that house is mine." She didn't whisper at Richard. She said it like she was already practicing. The kitchen fell into a silence so sharp I could hear the draft slipping through the doorframe. My voice was low, steady. "You're sure?" Linda nodded, eyes flickering away from mine. I wouldn't bring this up if I wasn't. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was talking to herself. That's how certain she is. I closed my eyes, just for a second, but long enough to see Mary standing by our old fence, smiling in the sun, telling me to always be kind. Kind, but not stupid. I exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Linda." She shook her head. "Richard, I think Rachel is preparing something. You need to be careful." Then she left, taking the warmth of the kitchen with her. Sunday afternoon, the church incident. Michael picked me up for church, a rare gesture and orchestrated entirely by Rachel. She stepped out of the car wearing a bright Christmas smile, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut through paper, wood, or bone. "Dad, we think it'd be good for you to get out more. The church atmosphere will help your spirit." Spirit. A simple word. But in the hands of a toxic person, it weighs more than lead. I got in the car. I didn't want a scene in front of Michael. Bend Community Church was warm that morning, the scent of pine candles, cinnamon, children laughing in the yard, people exchanging cheerful holiday greetings. But something was wrong. And I knew it the moment Rachel opened her mouth in front of Pastor Helen Mary's old friend and one of the sharpest women I've ever known. Rachel put on her best concerned daughter-in-law face. "Pastor, we're so worried about Dad. He's been forgetting things, misplacing keys, confused, talking strangely." I turned to Michael. He lowered his head, didn't argue, didn't defend me. Part of him had already absorbed Rachel's poison. Or maybe he was too weak to stand between us. Pastor Helen looked at Rachel for a long, heavy moment. Her eyes held that sternness only pastors who've seen too much human suffering can possess. Then she said quietly but firmly, "Rachel, care doesn't start with taking someone's home." Her voice wasn't loud, but it hit like a church bell striking hollow stone. Rachel froze. Her smile cracked. It was the first time I saw Rachel's confidence fracture. But it was also the moment I understood she would not stop. She would simply change tactics. Rachel recovered almost instantly, shifting her tone to honeyed sweetness. "Pastor, I only want him to be safe. A big house winter coming. It scares me." The people around us began turning their heads toward me, not pity, not sympathy. The look Rachel wanted. Is he okay? Is he slipping? Does he need to be moved? For his own good? Rachel was planting the seeds. And now she was watering them. If you want to destroy someone, you don't need to strike them. You just need to make others question them. I stood tall, voice firm, as old pine. I am perfectly capable of caring for myself. And I am not confused. Pastor Helen nodded, looked at me, then at Rachel, and in that look there was a quiet accusation. "I know what you're doing. Richard has always been the clearest mind in any room." Rachel tightened her grip on her purse. I heard her nails tapping the metal clasp, a small sound, but icy. I realized something then. Rachel didn't just want the house. She wanted the narrative, the story that would legally back her claim. If the community believed I was losing my mind, the law might follow. And if the law followed, my home would no longer be mine. This wasn't greed. This was erasure, the drive home. When Michael drove me back, no one spoke. Rachel sat in the back seat watching me through the mirror, calculating, measuring how much of me she still needed to break before the rest would crumble on its own. When we pulled up to my house, she spoke first. "Dad, we only want what's best for you. Don't misunderstand us." I cut her off. "Rachel, I understand. Perfectly." She smiled a smile that didn't bother hiding anymore. "Good." She stepped into the car, closed the door softly, not like an ending. like the beginning of a darker chapter. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at the lake, a lake so dark it looked like a sheet of ink. The wind tore through the pine branches, whispering like voices just out of reach. And I understood, it wasn't just the house at risk. It was my place in my son's life, my presence, my reality. Rachel didn't just want to take the house. She wanted to build a world where I no longer existed. And when someone begins erasing you from their story, you only have two choices: disappear or stand up. And I knew which one I had to choose. Christmas night passed like a storm that leaves broken branches behind, but the cold that stayed didn't come from Ben's winter. It came from the realization that someone inside my own family was waiting quietly for me to fall. I woke in the middle of the night, not because of a noise, not because of a nightmare, but because I felt Mary calling me. I got out of bed barefoot on the floorboards that felt as cold as a morgue slab. Moonlight slipped through the window and landed directly on the old safe, the one I hadn't touched since the day Mary died. I didn't know why, but I opened it. Old documents, a few faded photographs, Mary's wedding ring, all in their usual places. But there was something new, a small silver USB stick, held in place with tape, handwritten on the label, for Richard or Peter, if needed. Mary's handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. I sat down and plugged it into my laptop. My heartbeat was slow but heavy, as if my body already knew something was coming. 2 files appeared, one photo of Mary, one audio recording. I clicked the audio file. For the first few seconds, all I heard was wind. Wind from where, wind from when I didn't know. Then her voice broke through. Mary's voice, the voice of a woman who had been gone 4 years. The voice I thought I had forgotten, but had only buried. Richard, if you're hearing this, it means someone is trying to take what belongs to our family. I froze. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. You always believe in the good in people, but sometimes there are those who see kindness as an open door. My hand tightened around the arm of the chair. Part of me wanted to stop the recording, but the other part, the part that had been wounded for months, needed to hear every word. You love this home. I do too. It is our life. If someone tries to take it, do not yield. Stand up, even if you stand alone. Her voice cracked on the last sentence as if she recorded it from a place cold, windy, and far away. My hand slipped. The USB fell onto the table. And for the first time in years, I cried. Out loud. Not because I was afraid of losing the house, not because of the betrayal, but because, for 4 long years, I had lived as half a man, and that night, the other half, the half named Mary, came back to protect me. The next morning, the legal turn, I went to Peter's office. His windows were fogged from the cold. Through the glass, I saw him hunched over paperwork, a man shaped by decades of law, carrying the creases of other people's tragedies. I walked in and set the USB on his desk. Peter put on his glasses and played the recording. He listened to the entire thing, without a single interruption. When it ended, he placed his hand on the glass door, not to open it, but to steady himself. Richard. Mary saw this coming. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Have you made your decision? Peter asked quietly. I inhaled slowly and said in a voice that didn't sound like mine, I'm creating a living trust. Peter didn't question me, didn't lecture, didn't hesitate. He simply pulled out a fresh file and began drafting. Living trust. 2 simple words, but in American law it is a fortress. A steel wall around your home. While you're alive, no one can touch it. Not your son, not your daughter-in-law, not the bank, not a forged signature. When he finished, Peter slid the pen toward me. Sign here, Richard. From this moment on, this house follows the will of the one person who still understands its value. I signed. 1 stroke of a pen, but it saved an entire life. That afternoon, the test. As if fate wanted to test my resolve, Rachel appeared at my door. No knock, no call ahead, just walked in with an expensive bag and a neatly prepared stack of papers. Dad, I need your signature. This is a new senior medical insurance form. It's good for you. Really good for you. She spoke like she was selling vitamins, but her eyes were cold glass. I looked at the top page. Insurance authorization form. But in the corner printed too faintly, too far left, I saw transfer of. I turned to the last page. Property relinquishment. Signature required. A property transfer, dressed up as a medical form. I looked at Rachel. She smiled. Just sign it, Dad. No need to make this complicated. I kept my voice calm, so calm it startled even me. What if I signed the wrong copy by mistake? She laughed. Too quickly. It's fine, Dad. Just sign anywhere. I'll sort it out later. So I signed, deliberately shaky off-edge, a signature no official would ever accept. Rachel didn't notice. She tucked the papers into her bag, still talking about benefits and coverage, as if I were senile. The moment she left, I called Peter. I have new paperwork. Check it now. Peter arrived at my house in 20 minutes. He opened the file, looked at the first page, then the second. 3 seconds. Then he said, Richard, this is a property transfer. She disguised it. This is document fraud. I let out a hollow breath. I know. She thinks I'm not lucid. Peter gripped my shoulder, a firm, cold, but sincere grip. You are clearer than all of them combined. And from now on, I stand with you. Not a shout, not a dramatic declaration, just a truth, dropped into the room like an iron weight. Rachel wasn't just trying to steal the house. She was building paperwork designed to erase me from the legal system entirely. That night I sat on the porch. The cold wind rattled the pine branches. The lake was a sheet of black glass. I closed my eyes, not to escape, but to hear Mary's voice again. If someone tries to take what belongs to our family, do not yield. I opened my eyes, and I knew from the moment I signed the living trust and Rachel signed her forged documents, this was no longer a family dispute. This had become law, truth, karma, and I would not lose. The first days of 2025 were smothered in a thick bend fog, the kind that bends the silhouettes of pine trees until they look like spirits standing guard outside your window. I thought the living trust would buy me a few days of peace, but people like Rachel, they don't stop. They just switch tactics. And her next move came from the last place I expected, the bank. That morning I got a call from Tom Becker. This time his voice wasn't polite or warm. It was uneasy. Mr. Hayes, we need you to urgently verify a transaction. I frowned. What transaction? Tom exhaled, slow, deliberate, like he was trying not to alarm me. A charge of $400 to $800 at Tiffany & Co. on your secondary card last night. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles went white. What secondary card? Tom cleared his throat. The card under the name Richard Hayes Jr. opened at the request of your representative. The signature on file looks identical to the refinancing documents we discussed earlier. My blood turned cold. The previous refinancing documents. The forged signature. Now someone was using that forged signature to impersonate me financially. My voice dropped deep, low, winter cold. Tom, I have never opened a secondary card. Not ever. A pause. Then Tom said quietly, I know. That's why I called you first. When the call ended, my hands shook, not from fear, from disgust. There are kinds of theft that take your belongings, and then there are kinds of theft far worse, the ones that take your identity. Someone was trying to become Richard Hayes, and I didn't need long to guess who. 3 p.m. the performance, Rachel showed up 3 hours later. Tear-stained, red eyes, perfect timing. A performance rehearsed frame by frame. She held a tissue to her face, voice trembling. Dad, do you really think I did that? I didn't answer. I wanted to see how long the act would last. She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Michael said you think I used your card to buy jewelry. I just wanted to get you something nice after such a hard year. Gaslighting, expert level. Turn yourself into the victim. Make the other person feel cruel for suspecting you. She looked up at me. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but the mascara stayed perfect. That's the thing about toxic people. They cry with their eyes, but never with their heart. Dad, do you really think I want your money or your house? You think I'm that kind of person? If I hadn't seen the security footage, if I hadn't opened Mary's USB, if I hadn't documented every detail in my notebook, I might have faltered, but not anymore. My voice was ice, Rachel. What I think doesn't matter. What the bank sees, that's what matters. Her tears stopped instantly. Her face changed like a mask slipping off mid-scene. What did the bank say? I looked her straight in the eye. They called me. Not the representative. Rachel stood abruptly. Are you accusing me? No, I'm stating the truth. You're the one afraid of it. Her expression hardened. Cold, sharp, dark. Then she said the classic line every manipulator uses when a plan goes wrong. If you think I did this, there's no point in talking. She stormed out, heels hitting the hardwood like a hammer driving nails. But the worst part was still ahead. 2 days later, the flowers, Linda came by with a bouquet, not to thank me, to ask me a question. Richard, why did Rachel send me flowers? I stared at her. Flowers. What flowers? She handed me the small card tucked inside. Linda, please help me convince Dad to sell the house before the market drops. He needs someone on his side. Rachel. A bitter taste spread across my mouth, the taste of manipulation wrapped in sweetness. Linda crossed her arms, annoyed I knew she was lying. I looked at the receipt. The payment wasn't from her card. She handed me the slip. The payer name, Richard Hayes Jr., the fake identity, the fraudulent card. Rachel had used the forged card to buy flowers and then sent them to my neighbor to build a narrative. Richard wants to sell the house. Richard is confused. Richard needs guidance, a story designed to isolate me. I sat down slowly. The room swayed like a boat in heavy wind. Linda placed a hand on my arm. Richard, from today on, you're not alone. Some promises don't need speeches. They fall around you like a warm coat in a storm. And from that moment forward, Linda became my first silent ally. She heard Rachel's whisper by the fence. She saw the fraudulent receipt. She recognized the pattern. She believed me. And she stood with me. That night I wrote everything in my notebook. Tiffany & Co. charged $4, $800, fraudulent secondary card, signature copied from forged documents. Rachel's staged tears, flowers to Linda receipt under Richard Hayes Jr., rumors that I was confused and planning to sell. Each line was written slowly, carefully, not like a diary, like a reverse will, not a will to leave my belongings behind, but a will to preserve the truth. Some people attack you with fists, some with the law, but the most dangerous are the ones who attack you with reputation. Rachel tried to strangle me with public perception. But she forgot one thing. When the truth is recorded, it becomes a blade sharper than any lie, and I had just begun sharpening mine. There are truths you can see with your eyes. There are truths you can hear with your ears. But some truths only explode when you happen to walk into the wrong moment or the right one. For Michael, that moment arrived on a cold afternoon in early January. I was sitting in the kitchen with my evidence notebook open when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up. Michael walked in, no call, no text, no warning. That almost never happened. He stood in the doorway like he'd just run from a nightmare he wasn't ready to describe. Dad, I wanted to check if you needed anything. His voice wasn't the voice he used when Rachel was around. It was smaller, less sure, trembling around the edges. He walked toward the kitchen. Then he froze. Because there, standing by the dining table, was Rachel shoving another document in front of me. This time it was an update to family physician information. But all it took was one glance for me to see the words authorization and transfer hiding on the last page. Michael's eyes widened. He looked at me, then at the papers, then back at Rachel. What are you doing? He asked. Rachel turned around with a smile that lasted less than a second, a smile that fell apart the moment it hit air. You're home early. I'm just helping Dad with his medical forms. You know how winter is for older people. I cut her off. Michael, I don't need to sign anything. Rachel shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. And Michael saw it. He saw everything. He stepped to the table, picked up the papers, read them carefully. For the first time in months, I watched my son truly study something Rachel handed him. I saw the shift in his eyes. Recognition. Hurt. Doubt. And then he asked the question that cracked the entire room. Why would a medical form include a section for asset control? Rachel's jaw tightened around her purse strap. Are you accusing me? She snapped. There it was, the classic line, the gaslighter's anthem. Michael didn't bite. I'm not accusing you, I'm asking a question. But Rachel never tolerated questions. Questions threatened the script she wrote in her head. She snapped, "Richard is confused. Can't you see that he doesn't understand paperwork anymore? I'm trying to protect this family." I saw Michael's shoulders tense, the tension of a man being pulled apart by two loyalties. He stood there between us, and for the first time, the line connecting him to Rachel began to crack. He threw the papers onto the table, not hard, but the sound of the pages hitting wood felt like a fault line splitting. Later that afternoon, Michael told Rachel he was going to get groceries, but I knew he needed space. He needed distance from her. He needed air. That night, while Rachel was cleaning the bathroom, Michael pulled out the documents she'd pushed on me the week before, the ones I signed intentionally wrong to get a copy. He sat at the kitchen counter, flipping pages, studying every line. Then he stopped. His voice broke. "Dad, this signature isn't yours. The stroke is different." Michael had watched me sign things since he was a child. Permission slips, camp forms, car papers. He knew my signature better than anyone. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He had finally seen with his own eyes the truth he had avoided for nearly 2 years. Later that night, the backyard. When Rachel went upstairs to shower, Michael called me out to the backyard. There were no lights, just moonlight on thin snow and our breaths turning to fog in the cold. His voice was barely a whisper. "Dad, I think Rachel is doing something very wrong." I looked at him, my 38-year-old son, suddenly looking like an 8-year-old boy again. "You need to see clearly, Michael. Not through my words, through your own eyes." He nodded, silent, but I knew that nod was the most painful nod of his life. The next morning, the laptop Rachel left for work with a quick, shallow kiss and said, "Don't forget the paperwork, babe." The door closed. Within 20 seconds, Michael turned to me. "Dad, I need to check her laptop." Rachel's laptop was fingerprint locked, but Michael had access. He walked into her study, sat down, opened it. Documents folder empty. But then he opened something Rachel thought he'd never find: hidden files. And he stopped breathing. I walked behind him. On the screen was a folder called Signature Practice, RH. My blood slowed to ice. Michael clicked it. 17 scanned copies, all of my signature. Some traced over in faint pencil, some photocopied with purposeful distortion. One even marked with red notes correcting the angle of the H, like a teacher grading homework. Michael covered his mouth. He didn't cry, but the color drained from his face. I can't believe... Rachel... He sank into the chair. I placed my hand on his shoulder. It trembled, not from cold, but from betrayal deeper than any winter chill. The kind no man is prepared for. At last, Michael whispered the words I had waited a year to hear: "Dad, I'm sorry." I answered quietly, calmly, heavily. "It's not your fault. Someone hid the truth from you, and someone wanted you blind." Michael stared at the laptop screen, the blue glow reflecting in his eyes like a blade. Then he said the sentence that changed everything: "Dad, I won't say anything to her. Not yet. I want to see what she tries next. I want to see it at the will announcement dinner." I studied his face, and for the first time in a long time, Michael looked clear, sharp, awake. He closed the laptop gently, so gently it barely made a sound. His voice was deeper, darker, firmer than I had ever heard from him. "Dad, let me help trap her." That was the turning point, the moment of no return. That night, as Michael went back to his room, I sat alone in the dark kitchen, listening to the wind, listening to the lake tapping against the frozen bank, listening to the memory of Mary's voice, the voice that once told me, "One day your son will see what he needs to see. Wait for him." And I knew. That day had come. Michael was awake, and once a man wakes up, a lie cannot survive the daylight. There are moments in life when you can hear destiny walking toward you, not with thunder, but with the laughter of someone who believes they've already won. The morning before that dinner, Michael's phone rang. Not a notification, not a work message, a call from Rachel. He put her on speaker, and fate allowed me to hear every word. Her voice came through bright, sharp, triumphant. "Tomorrow, I'll be the owner of a $2 million home." I stood at the sink. The water kept running, but I couldn't hear anything except that sentence. Michael didn't reply right away. Rachel continued, her tone slicing through the air. My mother's coming too. I want her to witness the moment. Witness. She said it like tomorrow night was a coronation, not a family dinner. Michael inhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. Rachel, are you sure this is the right thing? Rachel laughed a laugh full of arrogance, confidence, and certainty she'd already won. Michael, don't worry. Your father will sign, if you know how to make him feel guilty. I looked at my son. His face didn't twist in anger, it sank in pain. Michael ended the call. The kitchen fell silent, a silence with weight, a silence that pressed down on both of us like a stone. That afternoon, the war room, I drove to Peter Collins's office. The Oregon sky was dull silver, like cold metal waiting to be sharpened. The pine trees along the road stood perfectly still, as if the whole forest were holding its breath. Inside the conference room were 3 people already waiting. Linda, the neighbor who heard Rachel whispering at the fence, Tom, the banker who saw the forged signature, Peter, the man who knew everything, and the man who would soon reveal everything. The light outside was fading, casting the room in a muted gold glow that made the stacks of legal folders look like they were lit from within. Peter placed 2 items gently on the table. 1, the envelope containing the living trust. 2, Mary's USB. The room went silent. Silent in a way that made you aware of your own heartbeat. Peter spoke first, his voice low, steady. Richard, it's time. We have the law. We have the evidence. And we have the truth. Tom nodded firmly. I'll confirm the fraudulent transactions. And I'll testify the secondary card was opened using a forged signature. Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her voice was soft but unwavering. Richard, I'll testify to what I heard Rachel say. When he signs, that house will be mine. I looked at them all. They were not my blood. But in that room, they protected me more than my own family had. I turned to Peter. You remember my signal? Peter nodded. His eyes locked onto mine. When you say, Mary would be proud of this family, I'll play the recording. No explanations needed. No further instructions. Peter understood. He understood the weight of that moment, the one moment Rachel could never anticipate, never manipulate, never talk her way out of. The moment Mary would walk back into the room. Back home, the calm before the storm. By the time I left the office, the wind had picked up. It pushed against my coat, cold, sharp cleansing like it was stripping away the last of December's darkness. Linda followed me out and touched my arm gently. Richard, you're not alone. Not this time. Tom shook my hand. I'll stand with you, no matter how messy this gets. Peter closed the office door behind us and said in a tone as firm as steel, tomorrow, truth wins. That night I reached home early. No lights, no radio, no fireplace. I wanted the house quiet, so quiet I could hear my own breath. I set the table for 3, me, Michael, Rachel, and then I added a 4th glass. Mary's glass. The one that never moved, never changed positions, never left the table. It sat on the left where Mary always sat, where she'd rest her hand on my shoulder every Christmas Eve and whisper, Richard, it's okay if a dinner begins in silence, as long as it doesn't end in silence. I wiped that glass with a white cloth, slowly, carefully. Not because it was dirty, but because I wanted her here, in this house, in this fight. In the moment, truth reopened its eyes. I placed the living trust envelope in the drawer beside the dining table. Next to it, the USB Mary left for me. I slid the drawer shut, but before it clicked closed, I whispered, tomorrow, Mary, you'll be here. The wind tapped the window softly. Not enough to make me jump, just enough to make me feel like someone answered. I sat in the dark living room staring at the lake. The water was black as ink, still as glass. No birds, no cars, no neighbor lights. The whole town felt muted, like Bend itself was holding its breath for what was coming. Justice doesn't need a courtroom. It doesn't need a judge or a gavel. It only needs the right moment, the right truth, and a liar who thinks they've already won. I closed my eyes. Inhaled deeply. Tomorrow, it ends. Not with shouting, not with rage, not with chaos, but with a brief silence and a voice from someone who left this world 4 years ago. I opened my eyes and whispered quietly but firmly, not to myself, but to Mary tomorrow. We take back our home. Some dinners begin with wine and end with the truth. That night, the lake house glowed like a stage. Not a stage for a family gathering, but a stage for a final truth. A truth Rachel never imagined would be spoken out loud. I set the table hours before sunset, white cloth, polished silverware, ceramic soup bowls, wine glasses, and the fourth glass, Mary's glass. The candlelight stretched across the table in long, thin lines like two boundaries separating the past from the present. The door opened. Rachel stepped in first. She wore a dark wine-red dress, lips matching the shade of velvet-coated blade of a smile, soft at the edges, but razor-sharp underneath. "Dad, tonight, we celebrate. Let's toast to the future." She uncorked the wine bottle and poured more into my glass than usual. A familiar tactic. When Rachel wants you off guard, she tries to get you drunk. Michael followed behind her. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He didn't look at Rachel. His eyes were on me longer than necessary, the look of a man holding a truth heavier than the dinner ahead. "Dad, are you ready?" I nodded. "Yes, it's time." The dinner began with small talk, the kind that smells of perfume and lies. Rachel laughed too loudly. She clinked glasses with her mother, who sat across from me with an excited gleam in her eyes. The kind of excitement belonging to someone who believes her daughter is about to become the legal owner of a $2 million home. Rachel leaned toward Michael, whispering just loud enough for me to hear, "Just say what I told you. Make him feel guilty. Then everything will go smoothly." I didn't react. I simply set my fork down and slowly stood up. The room froze. Rachel squeezed Michael's hand under the table hard enough for his knuckles to whiten. She believed this was her coronation moment. I looked around the table, then spoke in a low, steady voice, quiet but heavy enough to crack the air. "I have something to announce." Rachel straightened. Her lips curled into a victorious smile. "Finally, Dad. Then, let's toast to the future." She lifted her wine glass. That was the last moment her smile would ever be whole again. The kitchen door opened. Peter Collins stepped out. Black suit, silver-rimmed glasses, carrying the cream envelope I had given him the day before. Rachel's expression shifted instantly. For a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to see it, her smile collapsed. Not completely, but enough to betray her. Peter stood beside me and opened the envelope. White legal documents gleamed under the candlelight, as crisp and sharp as American law itself. I spoke slowly. "This house will not be transferred to any individual." Rachel's fingers tightened around her glass. I continued, "I have moved all property assets into the Hayes Education Fund." Rachel's mother gasped. Michael stayed silent, but his fist clenched beneath the table. Rachel shot to her feet. You can't do this." I turned toward her, looked into her eyes. "I can't, but Mary can." Peter nodded once, then pressed play. At first only the sound of wind, then Mary's voice, the voice of a woman who left this world 4 years ago but returned tonight like the warmest lamp in the darkest room. "If someone is hearing this, it means you've protected what we built, Richard." Rachel went still, her face drained of color makeup, unable to hide the collapse beneath. Mary continued, "Don't yield, Richard. Don't let anyone take the home we made." The silence afterward was so complete I could hear Rachel's heartbeat stumbling in her chest. Her wine glass slipped. She caught it by 2 fingertips. The wine sloshed over the rim, bleeding onto the tablecloth like a red stain, a freeze frame in real time. Her smile vanished. A flicker of fear replaced it, raw, exposed, undeniable. Peter's voice cut through the quiet clean as a blade. "This living trust is effective immediately. Richard retains absolute ownership for life. No one can alter that." Rachel's mother turned to her daughter, horrified. "Rachel! What have you done?" Rachel stammered. I only, Peter interrupted. "We have evidence of forged signatures, false documents, and a folder on your laptop containing 17 practice samples of Mr. Hayes' signature." Michael bowed his head. Pain poured off him, visible to anyone watching. But when he lifted his head again, the fog in his eyes was gone. "Rachel," his voice cracked, low, trembling. "I saw everything." Rachel turned to him, begging, crying, denying. Michael shook his head gently. "Don't. Not anymore." The room fell silent. Not the silence of awkwardness, not the silence of anger, The silence of revelation, a truth too sharp, too bright, too overwhelming for a liar to hide from. I reached for Mary's glass, looked at Rachel one final time. You were right, Rachel. I couldn't change everything. But Mary could, and she just did. Rachel stared back at me. No confidence, no charm, no power, only fear, the fear of someone whose lies have been dragged into the light. Her wine glass wobbled again, steadied, then wobbled harder. Finally it fell. Red wine exploded across the floor, dark as blood, loud as the end of a game she thought she'd already won. Another freeze frame. Perfect. Final. Justice doesn't need a courtroom. It only needs to be spoken. At the exact moment a liar feels safest. And that night in a late Christmas dinner beneath soft candlelight beside Mary's untouched glass, the truth won. Some winters don't end with melting snow. Some end with an investigation. February in Bend was colder than usual. The wind coming off the lake carried something heavier than moisture, a silence so thick it felt like a warning that Rachel Hayes' life was about to change direction. And it did. The news arrived on a silver-gray morning. I was pouring coffee when the local TV anchor said Realtor Rachel Hayes is under investigation for signature fraud and financial abuse in a real estate transaction. I set the coffee pot down. I didn't sigh. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. The anchor continued. Sources confirm evidence includes forged refinance documents, unauthorized secondary credit accounts, and misuse of a senior citizen's financial information. Rachel's face appeared on the screen. Perfect makeup, polished smile, but beneath it, in bold red letters, under investigation. I didn't feel joy. I felt right. A slow, cold rightness, like the lake finally cracking open after months of ice revealing the honest water beneath. Michael called later that week. His voice wasn't the timid voice of a man being controlled. It wasn't the defensive tone of a husband trying to protect his wife, for the first time in a long time. His voice belonged to a man awake. Dad. I moved out. I leaned back in my chair. Good. He paused, then said something heavier than the winter air. Dad. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I didn't see what Rachel was doing. I didn't see how much danger you were in. I closed my eyes. Not because it hurt, but because the apology came too late to fix the past yet, right on time to save the future. Michael, you see it now. That's enough. He exhaled a release he'd been holding for months. If you need anything at all, Dad, I'm on your side. I know. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. As for Rachel, she called Michael nonstop. 20 calls the first day, 35 the next. Long texts, short texts, crying texts, threatening texts. But Michael had already blocked her. Silence, the very thing Michael once feared, became a shield around him. I didn't hear Rachel's voice again. No footsteps outside my door, no perfume drifting into my kitchen, no trace of the woman who once said, "Tomorrow, I'll be the owner of that $2 million house." This silence wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was karma. One afternoon in March, after receiving an email from Peter saying the case had been escalated to the federal level, I decided to do something I'd put off for far too long. I carried a cardboard box of old documents onto the porch. Spring was coming to Bend, but the air still bit like winter. The sun hung low. Its thin light brushed the wooden boards beneath my feet. Inside that box were scans of the forged signatures. The banking forms Rachel submitted, the disguised property transfer document, the Tiffany & Company credit bill. Old papers from the months I wish I could erase the packet Rachel brought that winter afternoon. Every piece of evidence that once made my hands shake, I spread them out on the old wooden table. Not with anger, not with regret, just closure. I struck a lighter. The blue flame touched the first sheet, curling the edges, then devouring every lie, every counterfeit stroke of a pen, every scheme Rachel believed was flawless. The fire cast a gold glow across my face. The wind lifted the scent of burning paper into the air. I watched, not blinking, not smiling, not because I enjoyed watching anything burn, but because I needed to see that toxic year turn into ash. I whispered low, steady only for myself, "That chapter is done." The ash rose from the table. A soft breeze carried it away, as if eager to remove every trace of the weight pressing on my chest for the past year. I stood, brushed the remaining dust from my palms, walked inside, closed the door. Karma doesn't need noise. It doesn't shout. It doesn't hurry. It just waits until the truth has enough weight to fall on the right person. And for Rachel Hayes, that moment had arrived. Not through shouting, not through revenge, not through retaliation, through truth. Truth that does not scream, does not beg, does not hide. Truth that once brought into the light leaves no shadows for lies to crawl into. I locked the porch door, poured myself a cup of hot tea, set it next to Mary's glass, and looked out at the lake. The ice had melted, clear, still, quiet. For the first time in years, I felt alive again. Some summers arrive late, and some arrive at the exact moment you've finally grown strong enough to feel them fully. The summer of 2025 was that kind of summer. Sunlight spilled across Bend Lake like honey slowly poured from a wooden spoon. The air was thin, gentle, and the scent of pine brushed across my porch like an old friend stopping by to say hello. And my house, the home I once feared would be stolen from me, now stood bright, calm, and clean like a page rewritten with better ink. I repainted the whole place in late June, a soft shade of blue, Mary's favorite. Out front, the lavender garden bloomed larger than ever, a small purple sea swaying quietly in the wind. The scent drifted into the kitchen every time I opened the door, as if a memory of Mary slipped in with it just to check on me. Sometimes I stood on the porch and watched that field of lavender move in waves, a gentle reminder that anything once broken can grow back. If you're patient enough, and brave enough to hold the ground for it. In early July, I opened a small workshop for local kids. I named it Mary's Workshop. Not to cling to the past, but to give the past a beautiful place in the future. The little room where Mary once taught me how to weave baskets now held 20 wooden tables. Each table had a box of colored pencils, scraps of pine, bits of yarn, and the old carving knives I'd kept since I was young. Every Saturday, Bend kids filled the place running, laughing, shouting, scattering bits of wood across the floor. And I loved that chaos more than any quiet Rachel ever tried to trap me in. On the first day, Michael brought Emily. She burst through the door and wrapped her arms around my chest. "Grandpa, is this all yours?" I brushed her hair gently. "All ours," I said. "And in a way, your grandma's too." Michael stood behind her, quiet, steady. But in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in him for years. Peace. Slow, honest peace. We walked through the lavender garden. Michael stayed silent for a long while before saying, "Dad, I'm still not ready to forgive myself, but you taught me something. Family doesn't begin with promises. It begins with how we make things right." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You've already made things right. That's enough." Emily ran toward us, then holding a tiny woven basket, crooked, uneven, several strands sticking out. "Grandpa, is this good?" I smiled. "It's perfect. Perfect things always start a little crooked," she giggled. Then she asked the question I knew would come. Why did Aunt Rachel leave? Was she mad? I knelt beside her, looking into those clear, bright eyes, the same eyes Mary once had. She left because sometimes the people who think they've won are the ones who lose first. She nodded like a child who only understands half, but understands it purely. One warm afternoon, Pastor Helen came by. She sat with me on this porch, iced tea in hand, her eyes drifting toward the shimmering lake. "Your home looks beautiful, Richard. But what's changed the most is you." I let out a soft laugh. "I'm just living again. It's been a long time since I felt like myself." Helen nodded, her voice gentle as the small waves kissing the shore. "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's wisdom, and wisdom always arrives after the storm." I stared at the sunlit water, at the lavender bending with the breeze, at the world breathing in a steady rhythm. "I don't know if I can forgive, Helen, but I can let go." She smiled softly. "Letting go is sometimes stronger than forgiveness." That night I sat again at the dining table, the same table that had once been a battlefield for a dinner Rachel thought she'd already won. Candlelight flickered. Mary's glass sat in its usual place, no longer a symbol of pain, but one of peace. I rested my hand on it. No trembling, no sorrow, no darkness. Just a man, 66 years old, looking at the last summer of a chapter in his life. Not last as in ending, but last as in completed. A chapter I survived and stood back up from. Justice doesn't always shout. It doesn't always crash in with fire and fury. Sometimes, it's a quiet dinner, a truth spoken at the right moment, and a smile fading from the wrong face, a sip of tea, a deep breath, a lavender summer, and a life given back by silence at the right time. Before we close this chapter, I want to leave you with this. If you have ever been dismissed, manipulated, or made to feel small inside your own home, remember this. You don't need to shout to reclaim your life. You just need to stand firm. Truth always finds its way. If this story touched you, like this video, it helps more people find hope. Comment where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your own journey. And subscribe, because I have many more stories. You'll want to hear stories where peace always wins in the end.